this chapter as a whole is like a thing of marriage, right? Like we should always be moving in unison.
In agreement.
Yeah. Because what happens when one person gets passive or one person's not being present, because I would consider this as him just not being completely present, right? What happens in that is now it gives the devil room to kind of sneak in, right? He's sitting at the door. We know that.
Yeah.
So as soon as he sees the opportunity, like this one, right? Somebody's losing faith. One person's losing faith. It was Abram's job when Sarah was losing faith to stand in, right, and say, nope, this is the way we're gonna do it. And once again, we're seeing it again. Same exact thing. Hey, you know what? That's your handmaiden.
Yes.
You caused this issue.
Yes. You deal with it as you see fit.
Yeah.
I wash my hands.
I wash my hands. Welcome to the Carey Podcast. I'm your host, Donovan Carey. Here's my lovely wife, Tiara.
Hello, guys.
And today we're going through Genesis 16 and 17.
Yes. So let's just go ahead and dive into it.
All right. I'm all for that.
So it begins by letting us know that Abram and Sarai, because I've been saying Sarah, Sarai is still barren. And Abram is in his 80s. Somewhere in his 80s at this point, right?
Yep.
And we know in the previous chapters, Abraham definitely expressed his frustrations to the Lord and was like, God, you giving me all these promises, but still no child.
Yeah.
And then we know that God sealed a covenant for him, right?
That's where we ended.
Yeah, that's where we ended, to basically say, my word is my word. I'm going to stand on my word, right? But here we are in chapter 16, years later, haven't heard from the Lord, at least not recorded here.
Yeah.
At this point, they have been in the land of Canaan for 10 years, right?
Yep.
So I can only imagine Sarai's thoughts, Abram's thoughts, like, okay, you told me to come to the land of Canaan. You told me to come to the promised land. We've been here for 10 years now. You know, I thought before that the reason why we were barren was because we were not in the promised land,
the fruit,
right?
The land of fruit,
the land of fruit. But now we're here and there's still no child. So I can understand the frustration.
Yeah, especially they're not hearing from God anymore, because we actually don't know, at least as far as we see, it's been at least 10 years since he's heard from God.
Right.
And what we see next is literally Sarai start to take stuff into her own hands.
She starts to take things into her own hands. So in verse 1, it basically mentions that they have this Egyptian servant, right? And if you guys remember, Abram, Abram and Sarai were in the land of Egypt before, when the land of Canaan had a famine. And while they were in Egypt, they accumulated, all this wealth and even servants, right?
Yep.
Here, because I don't know if y'all saw the last episode when I spoke about this, where I said, sometimes when you receive money deceitfully, not the way that God has led you to earn that money or earn that wealth, sometimes it can come with consequences. And you say all the time, but yes, all the times it can come.
I'm about to say, I think it always comes with consequences.
Yes. And here we will see how that consequence played out. So
just in what's about to happen. So let's just quickly cover what's going to happen. Where Sarah essentially goes to Abram. And says, Abram, look, I got this Egyptian servant named Hagar. And since I can't have a child, you should have a child with her, and then I'll take it as my own.
And you know what I was thinking? I wonder if in her mind, she was thinking like, okay, God has been speaking to you directly, saying that you were going to be the father of all nations. He never mentioned my name. He never mentioned me. He never said Sarai. So I wonder if she's like, okay, well, maybe the promise is supposed to be fulfilled through someone else.
Nope.
And not me.
That's an excuse.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, I wonder if that's what she was thinking in that moment, for her to be able to think, okay, let's try to do it through someone else, because at this point he has not wed anyone else, which was common in that time.
Yeah, so the handmaiden was common, and this was very much, this was not out of the ordinary for that time.
Right, but for them, they waited 10 years in the promised land and did not, went or married another or had any type of other secondary wives, whatever you want to call it, concubines. They haven't went that route. They trusted God's word this whole time. And then now it's like, okay, I don't know, maybe we misunderstood. Maybe there's another way to get to this promise that God is talking about.
So I don't know if I believe that they trusted God this whole time. I think they still had some skepticism. And I think that only because every time we've seen so far that God has brought it up, there's always some skepticism with Abraham. But I'm this old. So I think they still have some skepticism. I think what happens now, I do think they do come to a point where, I don't know if they trusted God's word, but I do think they're at a point now.
I think they did. I think it's like, how like you holding on to it, but then again in the back of your mind, it's still like
this can't be possible.
Yeah, like I don't know. Like we still trying and nothing has happened. Like for them to have waited 10 years to finally say, hey, let me introduce, or maybe not introduce, but hey, have my servant here. I really do feel like deep down we're still holding on to God's promise. Back to what I was saying about her thinking, okay, maybe I wasn't included in God's plan. If that was the case, my thing is, I feel like God didn't have to actually mention her name because God sees them as one flesh. Yeah. So if he's talking to Abram, he's talking about her too. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. Because God never refers to Eve by Eve.
No.
He refers to them as Adam.
Exactly.
So I imagine God refers to Abram and Sarah as Abram.
Right. So, and I wonder if she just in that moment, she just separated the two and was like, no, you're talking to Abram. You had to be talking to Abram because still nothing has happened. But in reality, God was talking to her as well. I feel like if God gives you a plan, that plan is going to include me. If God talks to me about something, that plan is going to include you as well. But in that moment, I don't think she saw that for her to.
I just think she just lost patience.
Yeah.
I think it's just that, because we're at a time now, they don't have a Bible, right? They don't have, and clearly they, at this time, change religions a lot. Like, and the reason I say that is because Hagar is Egyptian, yet Hagar is praying to this God when we get there. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but what I'm saying is it's not uncommon, it seems to me, that they just kind of float in and out of religions. I don't think that they were as tied as we are today. I think Abram was. So, but I'm saying just in general, I don't think so. So I think she just lost patience.
No, I believe that as well. But I think it could have been a combination of things. I think one is, I don't know if that plan includes me. 2, it could have been the impatience. Or 3, let me help God along. Like I think I agree with so many things that could have happened there that's not really that clear. Yeah. But, it can go either way. So she goes to Abram, right? So moving along, she goes to Abram and she gives Hagar Abram and she's like, have this child with her, right? Take her as your wife, have the child, X, Y, and Z. And then Abram agrees.
For me, when I was studying, it instantly brought me to the Adam and Eve story. Because I saw it as God made a promise to Abram, just like God was speaking directly to Adam. So God was speaking to the head of the household. Now, the lady of the household is now making decisions or making the next move that goes against God. And in both cases, they became passive. Yeah. Right? So, though it wasn't Abram's idea, just like it wasn't Adam's idea, they both were like, okay. Yeah. And I do think this is a common thing. I was literally, as I was reading it, I literally took like 30 minutes just like, why does this happen? Because I do think this still happens today where you'll see men kind of I don't want to call it checking out because it's not really checking out. Yeah. But they become more passive, especially when it comes to the household and things that happen in the household. And you'll find this with even guys who are very aggressive in the workplace. So like guys who in corporate America or whatever, they're extremely just hands-on. And then when it comes to the household, they're just like, whatever she says goes. Yeah. And I was really like thinking, like, why does this happen?
I know for me, what I pulled from this section, and I'm just going to relate it to today, how people can really cause another believer to stumble in their faith walk. Yeah, because God did speak to Abram, and I'm sure she knows that God spoke to Abram. I'm sure Abram has told her, hey, God told us this, X, Y, and Z. She know how strongly he feels about him. He worships him. I know she knows where he is and where he stands in his walk. Yet she basically convinced him to do something that went against what God wanted for him. And we know that Paul was very big on, basically teaching against people causing others to stumble. Yeah. And that right there is exactly how it can happen. Yeah. Just like that.
Yeah, no, like as you lose faith, you start to convince other people, right? Like, and it's not intentional a lot of times, but once again, I think she's like 90 years old at this point, right? So, she's looking at it, and we know later on that Abram's even looking at it. And I think, once again, God's talking to Abram. Yeah. So Abram has direct proof God exists. God has come through on his promises. I know from experience, sometimes when someone is talking to you about their experience, sometimes you may say, yeah, but was that actually God? That could have been that. Yeah. Too. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I think that's the position Sarah's in. Yeah. So Sarah's probably like, well, yeah, I believe you, but then the more time goes on, it's like,
I don't know. Did you hear him correctly?
Yeah, did you hear him correctly? Once again, I mean, back to what you said, that could very well be a possibility. Like, well, maybe I wasn't actually included in that. Maybe this is another route to get there. Yeah. We know that you're going to be the father of many nations. Doesn't mean I'm going to be the mother. Right. So once again, separating herself.
Well, the father of a great nation.
Sorry. Yeah. The father of a great nation. Sorry.
Yeah. So in verse 4, it does talk about how Abram does have sexual relations with Hagar, and she gets pregnant. Seems very quickly, right? But then that's when things start to turn around, right? Things start to turn up a bit. And at that point, Hagar starts to treat Sarai with contempt. And I know in your version, it says...
Say despise.
Despise. So, yeah.
But even like the research on despise is pretty much to treat lightly or with contempt. So I read it as essentially to disregard her authority, right? Because like, we're both his wife at this point, but I got the child. Yeah. And, if you're into a lot of those old school kind of shows where you see like wives and concubines and how it works, it's insane. But a lot of it is based on that child. Who has that first child? Yeah. That is the wife. So in my studies, it was showing that once they conceive a child, they're actually raising status. Like that's how it was back then. It's not just in their household. That is actually how it worked, is that Hagar should have raised in status. Now, I'm not saying above Sarah, but she should have raised in status. She should not have been looked at as such a servant anymore.
Well, they didn't. They said they consider her a wife in my version. So
they called her a wife in this
so
too.
She did raise status for sure, but definitely doesn't seem above Sarai, right?
No. Definitely not.
So it could have been, her attitude could have been the fact that I have this baby and I'm wifey status now. It could have been resentment. Like, I didn't want to even be in this position right now. I don't want my child to have to belong to Sarai, It could have been that, or it could have been hormonal. It could have been any of those three, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, and, to a point you were saying earlier, Hagar didn't actually get a choice, right? If you want to be technical. Yeah. So I think that could have happened too, where like you had somebody who was so low before, and now she has a little bit more status. Now she has a little bit more of a choice. So from Sarah's perspective, like, oh, she acting brand new. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's exactly what that was.
Yeah, like wait, who you think? Don't forget. Yeah, but I think that's what was kind of happening here.
Yeah. So then at this point in verse 5, Sarai gets upset with Abram, and she says to him, and this is the NLT version, this is all your fault. I put my servant into your arms, but now that she is pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me. So at this point, Sarai is putting all the blame on Abram.
That's interesting. What verse is that? I'm sorry.
5.
Because it didn't... okay. Yeah, I didn't read it that way. And it's because of how King James Version reads it.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it as her being upset, though.
Yeah.
But now I'm reading it, and as you said, I'm like, oh.
She was mad.
So now she's putting the blame on Abram.
She putting the blame on Abram.
Good lesson here.
And she has made it a you versus me thing when it was a we decision.
Well, it wasn't. Yeah.
It was a we decision. At the end of the day, he ended up agreeing to it. Yeah. And this is the point where I connected it to the Adam and Eve situation, because she basically passed this along to Abram, right? Like, she put this bug in his ear to go this route so that we can get this promised child, right? Just like Eve went ahead and passed that apple over to Adam.
Yeah.
And then Abram passively accepted it, just like Adam passively accepted it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I definitely saw the similarities here at this point for me.
Yeah. See, and that was one of those lessons that I think the Bible has been trying to teach us about just us as men being so passive. Because I hate to say it, but that is how it happens, right? Like, all right, you go along with something, but it still does fall on you.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're considering yourself head of the household, it does fall on you. And it shows that though it was Sarah's plan, and though she pushed her handmaid on Abram, now that it didn't work out the way she wanted it to.
Yeah.
And now that she regrets going against God's wishes, really, now, all right, it's Abram's fault. Yes. Right? And so if Abram would have just been
firm in his decision
and said, hey, God said to wait.
Yes.
We gonna wait. None of this happens.
Right.
Right. And it's just me paraphrasing here. But because because when I read hearken, it's just kind of to listen to, right? So because he let himself listen to his wife and go against God, it's funny because I'm pretty sure he did it thinking, all right, it's not gonna cause no waves.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
And then it ended up causing waves anyway.
Yeah, and because it brought jealousy, it brought
a whole nother
strife, it brought a child. I mean, outside of the marriage.
To
be honest, anger, conflict. You have literally broken the peace in your home.
Yes.
By following your wife's suggestion against God.
Against God,
yeah. So in verse 6, Abram responds and he's like, this is your servant, your problem.
Yeah.
And he basically told her to deal with it as she sees fit, right?
Yep.
And again.
Passive again.
Being passive, this is where he goes wrong.
I was going to say, it's the same thing. Like, they're separating that union. To me, this chapter as a whole is like a thing of marriage, right? Like, and how we should always be moving in unison.
In agreement.
Yeah. Because what happens when one person gets passive or one person's not being present, because I would consider this as him just not being completely present, right? What happens in that is now conflict is not it gives the devil room to kind of sneak in, right? He's sitting at the door. We know that.
Yeah.
So as soon as he sees the opportunity, like this one, right? Somebody's losing faith. One person's losing faith. It was Abram's job when Sarah was losing faith to stand in, right, and say, nope, this is the way we're gonna do it. And once again, we're saying it again. Same exact thing. Hey, you know what? That's your handmaiden.
Yes.
You caused this issue.
Yes. You deal with it as you see fit. Yeah. I wash my hands.
I wash my hands of this.
Yes.
And he should
not have.
Yeah.
Because of that, it led to Sarah treating Hagar terribly to the point where she wanted to run away.
Yeah, well, she left.
Yeah. So she ended up running away. Verse 7, it mentions how the angel of the Lord found Hagar in the wilderness, and she was by a well of water.
Yep.
Right? A spring of water is what I had in mind.
Fountain of water for me.
Yeah. So. Okay. Yes. And she was on her way to Shur. So she was somewhere between the land of Canaan and Egypt. So most likely she was trying to head back home to Egypt. Yeah.
That's what you call attention to detail.
Yeah.
I skipped all over that. I said, all right, she had a water fountain.
She was like, I'm out of here. I'm going back home.
Yeah.
But the angel of the Lord ended up finding her in the wilderness, which showed me that God was paying attention, first of all, this whole time. He, again, was not ready to let this child be discarded. So he's like, I have to intervene. I need to go down there and figure out what's going on, but
prevent this.
Let's deter what's about to happen right now, right?
So one of the things that I found interesting is like, okay, so God's intervening now. Why do you think he didn't intervene when Abram had this decision to make in the first place?
I think God, again, the free will.
Yeah.
He's going to let things play out. We see that today, right?
So now God got to turn into a marriage counselor.
Yeah.
Essentially. Like, hey, you need to go home.
Yeah, well,
I know you mad at your sister wife.
Yes.
But you need to go home.
Yes. So he made a command to her and a promise at the same time, right? Yeah. So he's like, he asked her where you're coming from and where are you going? Mm-hmm. And I think it was probably one of those situations where he was allowing her to speak her truth and allowing her to have like a reflection, like a self-reflection moment. Like, well, where am I going? Where did I come from? Like, I think it was probably one of those situations. But she did respond and she tells him that I am running away from my mistress, Sarai. And then in verse 9, he tells her to return back and to submit to her mistress. Mm-hmm. I know the situation looks bad, but I have plans for you and your baby. Yeah. And the angel of the Lord, mm-hmm. even tells her, you will have numerous descendants. Mm-hmm. You have numerous descendants, and it will be through your unborn son. Yeah. And even names him Ishmael, which means God hears. Here it mentions that he was going to have numerous descendants. A good bit of the scholars do believe that Ishmael, is the father of the Arabs. Yeah. Because of like the length of the location. Yeah,
I did hear about that, and I kind of want to dive into it a little bit more too, because we know Isaac is coming, right? Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff that we see going on today, mm-hmm. I think there's some interesting stuff there.
Yes. It goes on and basically tells her that this son of yours is going to be a wild donkey. Right? See, wild donkey.
What's funny though is in the King James, they just call him a wild man.
Oh, same thing.
Yeah, but so I want to kind of jump back a few verses if you don't mind. Yeah. So I found some things interesting, mm-hmm. right? And maybe it's just the way the King James Version wrote it. Verse 10. Mm-hmm. This is an angel, right? And the angel says, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly. Yeah. And that one got to me because I'm like, who's this angel to have this authority? Right?
Oh, yeah. NLT says, I will give you more descendants than you can count.
Yeah. So, and this is supposed to be an angel of the Lord. So I found that interesting. Mm-hmm. And that made me think, okay, do angels have more than we actually talk about? Because we mostly just talk about them as messengers. We mostly talk about angels in the sense of they're doing what God has them doing, not that they can do.
Or if God was just speaking through them.
Well, that's what I was going to say. But what I continue to read, because the Lord heard the affliction. Mm-hmm. And so when I connected was him saying and because the Lord, to me, that was almost like this connection almost between the angels and God. Like, yes, they have free will, but to me, I was looking at it like almost like these are the arms of God, mm-hmm. right? Like God thinks it and they just go straight into action, right? Because to me, the fact that he said, I will, but he knows, right? He knows this is the command of God already. Mm-hmm. I just found that to be interesting. I'm not saying anything one way or the other, but it's something that really stood out to me. But then I know you were kind of going into the fact that she called him a wild man. Oh, the angel called him a wild man.
Yeah, called him a wild...
donkey in this one.
Yeah, it said wild donkey of a man. In this one. So a wild donkey of a man in his life and the lives of his descendants. And they will be marked with conflict with everyone. And if it is the Arabs, I can kind of see that. If Isaac and Ishmael, are have brothers here, they are technically relatives, right? And then their descendants are relatives. And we know that today that there's a lot of...
Well, we could talk Israel-Palestine, right? I mean, I think that's a golden example, but that's pretty common, right? Mm-hmm. That Israel is essentially surrounded by Arab nations, and that's why, they have to defend themselves against them because of those differences in beliefs. When I think about it from Hagar's position, who's a servant, I think she's looking at it saying he's going to be strong. It's going to be like that, and when I saw, that's what scholars were saying, that the angel was saying to her, like, no, he's gonna be, because off rip they say he's gonna have 12 princes born to him.
Yeah.
So that means he's a king, right? Like, and I thought that was.
They didn't mention it yet. They didn't mention that yet. That's not till he speak to Abram. Yeah, so he didn't tell her that.
Yeah, he didn't tell her that. But, she said he's going to be a wild man, a fighter, essentially. That's how I got it. And he's going to... So when I listened to this, what I saw was he's going to be in the wilderness, right? Because she's already in the wilderness, but he's going to be a wild man. To me, I took that to be wilderness. He's going to be a fighter. It reminded me, again, of the idea of the city builders versus kind of the nomad. And I took it to mean... he's going to be more like nomadic, because I'm not going to say during that time, but definitely during history, those have been massive wars, right? Like you got like the Mongolians, like those were nomads, or even some of the Native American tribes were nomads. And that to me is how I saw it when I was reading it. So almost like him and what I'm going to call the city dwellers, in this case, what will become Israel, or they ain't gonna get along. He gonna be out there in the wilderness. He gonna be a little rough around the edges. He gonna look at these people like, and they gonna look at him differently, right? That's what I read when I saw it. That was kind of what was going through my head.
Yeah, I didn't really take too much from it, but just the fact that
he gonna be a wild man,
that he was gonna be a wild person here.
Yeah,
and so it's his descendants. And just, I mean, again, I just kind of connected it to the Arabs against the Jews. So that's just immediately where my mind went to. But of course, I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But despite hearing that she was about to have a wild donkey of a child, she was super excited to just hear from the Lord. Like, he hears me, he sees me, he's been, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know if she's been praying to God, because she clearly comes from a whole different culture. But now she has this encounter, right? Usually that's how it goes. You have this encounter and he's like, oh no, he's real, because she calls him El Roy, which means you are the God who sees. And then she names the well
Bir Lahai Roy.
Yes, which means the well of the living one who sees me. And this is the first time we see God being referred to as the living one.
Yeah. And there's a few things that we see, to be honest, because this is the first time also that an angel has been talked about in the Bible.
Yes.
So I found that interesting too. So right now I see three things that really stand out. Number one, first time we hear about an angel. Number two, she names her son, or God tells her to name her son Ishmael, which means
God who hears.
The God who hears. And now she's talking about the one who sees me.
Sees.
So,
and number four, the living one.
Yes, the living one.
The living one.
The living God.
And as we know, there's only one living God.
Yeah. So well, we know she obviously talking about our God.
Right. She's clearly right. So think about it. This is someone who's an Egyptian who believed in other pagan gods, all these Egyptian gods prior, I'm sure, right? And to have this encounter and say, oh no, he's a living one.
Yeah.
That is what stood out to me, because we talk about this all the time, how God is not a dead God.
Yeah. We got to be careful with that one too, because
he is a living God.
Yeah. Because a lot of people, I think a lot of people serve a dead God. That's different. That's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. Living God, he's still working miracles today. So.
And I'm sure she was just super excited, because when you think about it, he found her in the wilderness. He went to her in her wilderness season. Like, it just shows his nature.
Yeah.
Like, how many times have you been in the wilderness season and God just shows up for you?
Well, he came in and gave her direction, right? Because she clearly is lost at this point.
Exactly.
Right. I think that's one thing. And I think also, right, he tells her about her son. When I read this, I'm like, okay, he's going to be strong, right? And I'm thinking about her situation where she didn't have much say in it. I'm looking at her situation when she's a servant. And I'm like, I think to her, she's like he's going to do better than me, right? Like, that was very warming to hear. It seems like to me.
I think it was an overwhelming feeling to know that God had plans for her child before she even
with Sarah,
before she even thought about it. This situation,
even with Sarah acting, doing the stuff she did, it seemed to still be in God's will.
Yeah,
that's why I was asking, why didn't you think God intervened at that point? It seemed like it was kind of still in God's will.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. So Ishmael was always supposed to exist. Right now, God ain't tell her to do it that way or whatever, but I think this was still playing a part in his, what he wanted.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes, we don't understand it, but
yeah,
at least I don't. I don't really understand it, but hey, I'm leaning on his understanding at this point.
Right.
About this situation. Okay, so it does mention that Hagar ended up going back. And so she was obedient. She listened to God and she had the child. And Abram was 86 years old at this point. So that concludes chapter 16. So in chapter 17, it starts off by mentioning that Abram is 99 years old at this point, right? So he is pushing 100.
This is 13 years later.
Yeah. So at this point, Ishmael is 13 years old. And this is about 25 years? About 25 years from the very first time God has called Abram to come to the land of Canaan. God comes and visits Abram. He says to him in verse 1, I am Almighty God, which is El Shaddai. Walk before me and be blameless. Verse 2, and I will make my covenant between you and multiply you exceedingly. What I gathered from this was, I'm going to come through with my covenant because we know that he was the one that sealed. God himself is the one that sealed that covenant. However, there are terms and conditions. And in this term and condition, I require all of you. When he said that he needs him to be blameless, I need you to walk before me. I need you to be blameless. That means I require your full submission.
Yeah.
Your full submission here. And in verse 3, it mentions how Abram falls to his face, which to me was a sign of submission. Between verses 4 and 7, God basically reinforces his covenant with Abram and even expands on it, right?
Yep.
So in here, it mentions how Abram shall be the father of many nations, which we know in chapter 12, before he just said that you will be a father of a great nation. And then now he says you will be the father of many nations.
Let me ask, do you think that's because of Sarah's decision?
I don't know. I don't know. See,
because whenever I think of nation, I don't think of what we think as nations, right? To me, because back then they weren't calling that nations. They were calling that tribes.
Yeah.
Right? Location was a tribe. So what I'm saying when I see nation is the Jews are a nation. Christians are a nation, right? And originally he's like, you're going to be the father of a great nation. This was supposed to be Sarah and Abraham's child.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if now that Sarah has done this, now there's an Ishmael, now you have separated one great nation into many nations.
But you know what? I really don't know, because if it was a part of God's will, this was already written. You know what I'm saying? So he could have been said it in. We talked about this. I think we're going to keep going back and forth on like, how does that work exactly? Is it that it's already written, or is it that God is working as we, he might be.
I know, but I don't think we have the answer.
No, I really think in this case, I think that God just revealed things in parts. Like, I think he know what we can handle and what we can't handle. Yeah. And in that moment, he probably like a nation initially. All right. All you need to know is it'll be a nation. And then now at this point, we have built a relationship. We have built a rapport. We are at a whole nother level. Now I can let you know, it's going to be many nations. It's going to be many. And to confirm that, I'm going to change your name on top of that.
Yes.
From Abram, which is the father of many, to Abraham, which is the father of multitude, which also can be the father of many nations.
Yeah.
And you know what came to my mind? I was like, what was that like talking to other people around you? Like, my name is Abraham now. And to know the meaning, because clearly, I don't know if they were saying like,
what the meaning was at that time.
Like,
to have no children.
To have no children and be like, I'm the father of many nations. Like,
that's called faith.
I probably would have, I wonder if any of them were like looking at him, then looking at Hagar, then looking at Sarah, looking at Ishmael, and like, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to tell yourself to get through this.
Well, that's the thing. He was wealthy, so they probably, they just like, listen. Okay. Wealthy people get away with a lot, right? Like, just like, this fool sounds stupid, but paid me.
Okay.
He paid me. I got somewhere to sleep tonight. Whatever you say, dog. All right, father of many nations.
Yes.
hey, the father of many nations he come. You know how you do.
I don't know why that crossed my mind. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, just walking around.
Your wife hasn't had children yet.
Your wife, I mean, she was 90, and now, no, she's about 90.
He 99 on top of that.
She about 90 now. So,
yes.
They definitely looking at him like, bro.
Okay.
All right.
Maybe
Ishmael will do it.
But God also mentions in verse 6 that there will be kings that will come from Abraham. And then it reminded me of all the times that you would mention about why isn't Abraham, why Abraham isn't a king. And I think it's because it was just not for him, but for his descendants.
So that's funny that you pointed that out. I actually have another reason. When I was, and I know I'm the one pointed out to begin with, but when I was doing my study, actually, when I was doing my review, because I had already studied, I remember I was reading 1 Samuel, right? And I remember God actually never wanted Israel to have a king.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
right?
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, so God never actually wanted Israel to have a king because God saw himself as the king of Israel. That's why they never considered Abraham to be a king. So when I read it, what I thought was interesting, I went back to 1 Samuel. It's 1 Samuel chapter 8. I'm not going to read the verse because it's kind of the whole chapter. But essentially, Samuel has to go to God because the people of Israel want a king. And Samuel's like, y'all want a king to come take y'all money. He's going to come take y'all daughters. He's going to come do all of this stuff. God is y'all king. And eventually God was just like, give it to them if they want it so bad. But that's why Abram wasn't a king. So what I saw here, the point I'm making is when I saw this and I was kind of thinking about it, I'm like, well, God is just telling him what's going to happen. Yeah. It's not necessarily God saying he wants it to happen. Because I know based on 1 Samuel, he did not want them to have a king. Yeah. So I'm like, and I know that's a little bit ahead, but I do read the Bible outside of the podcast. Yes. So, I just thought that was extremely interesting. Like, oh wow, all right. So he's literally just telling him this is what's going to happen. Yeah. You're going to have kings. I also went to Jesus. Right. So I
thought about that too.
Yeah. So when I read it the original time, I said, okay, the king will be Jesus. But then it had an S behind it. So like, well we know they do have other kings. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's all I wanted to point out about the king thing.
Yeah, so also in verse 6, I wanted to point out the fact that he said he would make him exceedingly fruitful. Yeah. And this brought me back to when I was talking about Terah.
So Terah is Abram's father.
Yes, Terah is Abram's father, which is naming delay. Before Abraham went to the land of Canaan, his father led him to a place called Haran, which means barren, unfruitfulness. And I know you were looking at me crazy at that point, but I was just trying to show before that when he was led there,
it wasn't
fruitful. It wasn't from God. That was not God's will. Yeah. But now that he's in the land of Canaan, even though this is 10 years later, God is confirming to him that you will be fruitful. Yeah. Because now you're in the promised land. Now you are exactly where I wanted you to be. And this just shows how God moves when you are in alignment with him versus when you're out of alignment with him. But in verse 7 through 8, so God further confirms that his original covenant, which was in chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, will be passed down to his descendants. And it will be the chosen ones, right? So it's not going to be through Ishmael, right? Even though that is his descendant, but he was not the chosen one. Yes. He's not the promised child, should I say. But he basically mentions that they will get the land of Canaan. Even though Abraham is living there, he's still a foreigner there.
Yeah, it's not his land.
It's not his land. Yeah. His descendants will own that land. they will conquer that land later.
Isaacs.
And then he mentions that, and he will be their God. And then it just shows here why God was so harsh with the Israelites and would not allow them to partake in idolatry whatsoever. Because he already said here, I will be their God. Yeah. So if they got to be slaves for 400 years.
And I believe that's the last one, right? I will be their God. That's the last I will statement.
Yeah, that was the last one.
Yeah.
If they got to be slaves for 400 years, for me to show them how I can part the Red Sea and send them in the wilderness so they can see what I can do and help them conquer this land and whatever needs to be done to prove that I am God. Yeah. Then I would do that.
And it's interesting because when I saw that, when I think about that, I should say, it's the same thing Jesus had to do when he came. Yeah. Right. And I think there's also something else to this. You know how sometimes you get in a place, this comes from being humble or the opposite thereof, where you kind of feeling yourself and you get to a point where you like, why I got to keep proving myself? Yeah. And it's like, if God got to keep proving himself, who are we to say we ain't got to keep proving ourselves?
God been trying to prove himself from the beginning.
I know. It's like how many miracles he got to do. Yes. How many times he got to bring people out of stuff, and
how many times I got to repeat myself?
Exactly, and we still be like, yeah, it's been 10 years.
Clearly God knows it's hard, right? Like he knows, Jesus knew, they all know. Like, it's not easy. But we do our best. It seems easy on paper, right? It seems easy. But realistically, when you try to live it out, a lot of times you struggle with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at it, because like we just pointed out, the difference between chapter 15 and 16 is 10 years. Yeah. But if you don't recognize that that's 10 years, you're just thinking, oh, okay, God talked to him here and now God talking to him again. Yeah. But once you separate it out, like, oh, that's 10 years. That makes sense why Sarah starting to get a little anxious, right? Because now that's 10 years later. She thought she was too old before. Now she like,
I'm 90.
I'm dry. Yeah. Like what I'm supposed to, how I'm supposed to kick out a baby. Yeah. So, yeah.
No, understandable.
Clearly times have changed because Noah was kicking out babies at 500.
Yeah, at this point, I think after the flood,
yeah.
The biological system just changed for everybody. So in chapter 17, verse 9 through 14, this is where we see the mark of the covenant, right? So basically, God institutes a sign of a covenant with Abraham and his descendants. This is also a part of the terms and conditions that he had to go along with that covenant, right? Yeah. Where he basically tells Abram, I'm going to need you and every male brought or born under your household to be circumcised. This is just a sign that they have accepted those terms and conditions, right? And I wanted to know, like, your thoughts. Why do you think God chose
circumcision
as a part of the terms and conditions?
So I was slightly thinking about that, and I think it's because we're talking about the seed. This is where the seed comes from. So it's almost a mark on where the seed will come from. Yes, that's how I saw it.
Me too.
I also, once again, just like you kind of talked about with the idolatry, I think at this point God is saying, all right, now this covenant, this one, we talked in the past, Abram, but this one right here, this is the real one. This is the everlasting covenant.
Yes.
Right? So when I read this, I'm like, okay, God is trying to find a way. How do I separate my people from everybody else? Because it's about to get confusing, right? Like, God knows it's about to get confusing because as generations go, there's some people who going to stay my people. There's some people who clearly going to get bought into being my people, right? And then there's some people who may drift the other way, may begin to. So I think at this point, God is, how do I see who's mine? And then I also can see whose seed is mine. All right, this is how I can do it. You need to cut the foreskin. Yeah. That's how when I was reading it, that's what I was looking at. Because things about to get a little dicey. Yeah. I that's what it appears to me, right? Because right now we're still at Abram, who's supposed to be the first one. Yeah. So as things trickle down, how else is God going to know who's his people? Once again, if I see it as a war, which I try to always look at it, a war between God and Satan, I need to know who is with me. All right? Yeah. And you saying I'm with you is not enough. I need
action.
I need something that I can physically see. I need the mark that shows. I think it's no different than them putting the blood over for Passover. I think God always who
What's
with
the
me
mark?
was my soldiers, and I think that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think for me, I was looking at it more from a medical perspective. So like we know that even in today's time, people typically get the circumcision to prevent, like the bacteria that grows if.
Is it?
Yeah, so it's really done for like hygiene purposes because it's done for hygiene purposes because bacteria can grow in the extra skin.
I know that it is a hygiene thing, but I always figured we just kept doing it from. So when my folks explained it to me,
I mean, some people do it for religious purposes, but some people are not religious. So I was just more mainly talking about it from a medical perspective. A lot of times it's for hygiene purposes because of the simple fact that it can accumulate bacteria in the extra skin, which it can cause a bacterial infection for themselves or for the partner, right? So when you're cutting that skin, you're trying to lower that risk. And the way I saw it in relation to the biblical reason why God probably chose that was it's more like a purity thing.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, and then I also related it to, like you said, the seed. So if the seed is going to pass through it, I need it to be pure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like how I saw it. Also, right after it, in verse 13, it mentions how, God said if they choose not to do it, choose not to circumcise, to basically cut them off.
Yeah.
And immediately my brain, of course, went to like, how like diabetics their legs would get infected. So now they have to amputate it. It's because you don't want that bacteria to spread to other areas. You don't want them to get sepsis and then end up, you can potentially die from it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, God is like, nope. I want to keep it pure. I want to keep it clean. So if you are not going to be a part of this covenant, if you're not going to make that mark of the covenant by circumcising yourself, I want you cut off.
Yeah.
So,
and, I think the Jewish religion, they still do that. Like if I'm talking about when they talk about wives.
Yeah.
Like as far as I understand it, somebody could correct me in the comments, but I think they still because I have a friend who is Jewish and he was saying like, he was dating someone who's not Jewish. He was like, she would have to convert to Judaism before they get married. Like, in order for I think they still do that. So, and I they did get married. So I'm assuming she did. But, I don't know. Now, maybe that was just his preference.
Yeah.
But I'm just going based on my experience.
Yeah.
I think that might be the case. So, to your point, I mean, and we already know, right? This is the thing we've talked about for at least 2 episodes here, how the devil only needs one.
Yeah.
And I think that's God's point.
Yeah.
Like,
nope.
No,
you're
choices. Not going to get the one here. Because I keep going back to Jesus has to come through here. Jesus has to come through here.
So I need to keep it pure.
So it needs to be pure. It needs to be free of idols. I am the one and only God for these people. So yeah, I'm with you. I agree with you.
And then in verse 12, this part stood out to me, how God mentions that every child of 8 days old now in every generation must be circumcised. And I'm like, 8 days? What was it about the 8 days specifically? Now, of course, I'm going to go back to...
I'm going to let you unravel it.
I'm going to go back to the medical side. One thing I realized was newborns typically don't produce enough vitamin K, which is a clotting factor. What is a clotting factor? So you know how like when you get a cut, right? You'll bleed, but then the blood will start kind of like thickening up, right? Right. So that's done by a clotting factor. It's like a natural Band-Aid, right? So vitamin K is a clotting factor. So babies don't produce enough vitamin K until day 5 through 7.
Oh, wow.
And on top of that, there's another clotting factor called prothrombin, which reaches its peak around day 8 in babies. That part wowed me a bit because I was like...
That's wild because this is before any of this research.
Exactly. And I'm like, it's no way Moses knew this. Yeah. It's no way.
Abraham in this case.
Or Abraham,
yeah.
Moses is the one that wrote this. Yeah, and he specifically wrote 8 days. I'm like, it just shows.
This is divine knowledge.
This is divine.
This is, I created you. I know how your body works.
To the T, to the vitamin K.
Yeah,
that's the clotting factors.
That's actually crazy.
What?
That's mind blowing. Like, yes. The fact that you even looked into it is
because something was like,
why they ate?
Yeah. Why they ate of babies?
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was like, that just shows how very detail oriented God is.
Yeah. Well, that and he's just like, I don't want these kids to die.
Yeah, that part, right?
Because a lot of them would have died if you did it earlier. This is true. It sounds like, you know, I mean, today we have the technology to do whatever. But
he's like, do it as early as possible. But I need it done.
But they still can live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I thought that was
well done.
That had wowed me. Okay. Well I was stuck on that. I was over there like.
Let me tell you what I did. I said 8 days. And kept going. Kept reading. All right.
You know, I get stuck on the little smallest things. Yeah, sometimes.
No, that was good.
So then it moves on in verses 15, where God speaks to Abraham about his wife. Yes. Now we're finally gonna mention the wife after 25 years here, right? Because now he's like, now I gotta spell it out.
Yeah, because y'all
I didn't think I had to before. I mean, he probably knew he had to, but he's like, okay, y'all clearly been struggling with this idea that I was including Sarah in this. Now I'm going to let you know.
I'm gonna make it so clear. I'm gonna change her name so she know I was talking about her.
Yes. So that's exactly what he did. Yeah. He basically changes Sarai names to Sarah. So this is where she finally gets her name, Sarah, right? And Sarai means my lady or my princess, and Sarah means the princess of multitude. Yeah. So now we know that this covenant is involved with Sarah and Abraham. And then he follows up and he says, I will bless and also give her a son.
Yep.
And she shall be the mother of nations. Kings of people shall be from her. This just confirming that this included her this whole time.
Yep.
I'm giving you the names now because now.
Yeah. Now we're kicking into action.
Now I'm gonna move before.
Yeah.
Before y'all were Sarai, before y'all were Abram, because it wasn't time.
Yeah.
But now it is time.
I think what comes next and a point is Abram starts to doubt. Right. So we're at verse 17 now.
Yeah, so in verse 17, Abram basically responds by falling on his face and laughing. Him saying this to himself and then God responding just shows that I hear you,
fool.
Whether you are speaking out loud, I
think it's funny thoughts. Too. God wasn't even offended because I think the human thing to do at this point would be get offended.
Yeah.
How many times I don't, and now you still doubt.
I think it was just like he was overwhelmed with everything that God just said to him. You're finally mentioning Sarah. You're finally changing her name. You changed my name. This is starting to become a little real. Too real, but not too real. Like a little bit of just like, I don't really know. I'm pushing 100 and she's 90. But
I didn't take it that way. I took it to mean like he laughed almost. Not in mocking, that's not the term, but almost like
it's a joke.
Yeah, like, all right.
He took that as a joke.
You've been saying this. Okay, I'm going to have a baby at 100. I didn't have one at 85. Yeah. I didn't have one at 77 when we got here. I think he was 70-something. So
75.
75. I didn't have one at 75. Mm-hmm. She's pushing 90. I'm pushing 100. I think it was... so it wasn't really mocking. It was more so like, I done heard this before.
Yeah.
And God answered him directly.
Well, in 18, it mentions that Abram basically, his mind goes straight to Ishmael. He's like, all right, well, maybe the promise to go through him. Maybe that's what you mean. Do you mean it's him? Because, again, I'm 100. I'm pushing 100. He's 99. And my wife is 90 years old. And you have been saying this for 25 years at this point. So, clearly, it is through Ishmael, right?
Yeah.
But then in verse 19, God is like, all right, I got to spell it out even more, right?
Yes.
And he's like, no, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. Mm-hmm. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant and with his descendants after him. And I just thought it was funny that he named him Isaac because his name means laughter. To me, I feel like God has a sense of humor, because the fact that you laughed at me, you will forever remember you laughing at my covenant.
That's actually good.
Yes.
That's literally, I'm going to name your son after this laugh.
Yes.
So that every time you
remember
how you look like a fool after you have this baby. Because that's why I say, I think that was a mock. I do, like mock, not really the right word, because I don't think he would be trying to disrespect God. But I do think it's a little bit of a I hear you. And we all have done that, right? Like somebody who I'm not going to say God don't come through on his promises, but up to this point, when it comes to this promise, from Abram's and Sarah's position, it looks like, I'm losing a little faith in this. We may have to live with the fact that another baby not going to be born. Yeah. Right? And God's like, okay, well, I want you to name him Laughter.
Yeah. Which, again, goes back to your point where he didn't condemn him for it. It just shows it shows it. Yeah, he gave him grace.
Grace and understanding, really. Because that, I go back to the Cain thing, right? Like, it seems like God understands this stuff more than sometimes we even give credit to. And that's why I think it's interesting when you talk to people who are so like laws. Because I'm like, don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure God wants us to follow the laws. But God clearly has an understanding of the situation we are on,
this war we're fighting.
It's why he told us not to bite the fruit in the first place. Yes. So like he understands what is happening even more than we understand it.
We all still just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And so I think that that's interesting, where the human thing to do would be to be like, some people just took the blessing away from them. Yeah. But God's just like, all right, I'm gonna get the last laugh, literally, right? I'm gonna name your son Laughter, and you'll remember this.
So in verse 20, God brings up Ishmael, which is like, I'm gonna take care of your children. I said I was gonna take care of your children, right? Yep. And he said he will be blessed and he will be fruitful and will multiply. And this is where he mentions that he will beget 12 princes and a great nation. Yeah. Here, it just shows that he was fulfilling his promise that he made with Hagar earlier. Yep. So this is him just like confirming with Abram, the daddy.
He's going to be all right.
Your son is going to be all right. And then in verse 21, he finally gives the timeline. He finally gives him a timeline. He says, my covenant I will establish with Isaac, who Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year. So now he knows a year from now, I will have my promised child that I have been waiting for 25 years. Yeah. So I know that it was an overwhelming feeling for him, because what did he do? Immediately, it mentions how that very day, he goes and he get Ishmael and all the males of the house.
He start clipping.
And he starts circumcising everyone.
Ain't nobody safe.
No one.
Foreskin is gone.
Yes. But this just proves that now he fully trusts the Lord. What you mentioned to me today, I believe it. Yeah. I believe it. And I have accepted the terms and conditions.
Yeah. No, I think there's just in this conversation, you could talk about the importance of patience.
Just waiting on God's timing.
Yeah, waiting on God's timing. Because we don't really know the things that's happening that we can't see. Yeah. And I think that's a part that gets left out a lot. Like, I know there is a portion of it of like, we want to have what we want to have, and we always think we're ready for it. And I know there's a portion of it that is God preparing us for it. Yes. But then there's also things happening that we don't know.
Yeah. We don't know if there's angels fighting for us to get this done. Yep. We don't know if God is just still in the process of putting pieces together, preparing other people, to be in the right position. This person in this position, and this person in that position to open this door for you. Or let's say if it's a job, right? That's just the most common situation, right? Sometimes people pray for certain jobs. Well, maybe God is leading this person to retirement.
No, I even have a really good, because that's actually kind of what happened to me, where there was a position that I really wanted, and then there was a position that I was supposed to be my stepping stone to get there. The problem is when that position that was supposed to be my stepping stone to get there, when it opened up, I was not eligible to get it, right? Because I didn't have enough time to get that position. And so I kind of just took it as like, all right, I mean, I guess I'm going to have to work another way. It's going to take a lot longer. And what ended up happening is I ended up getting another position that was like a lateral to that position.
Yeah.
And I didn't think of it. And then one day, the guy who was in the position I actually wanted, one of them retired. And so, like, I still ended up getting there, and I actually ended up getting there faster than I would have had I done it my way.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a testament to just, you know, they say God works in mysterious ways, right? Like, you may be waiting for God to put other pieces at play, right? God is playing a 4D chess match underwater. What I'm saying is, it's very complicated.
Yeah.
It's not dependent on just you.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes you are there just to learn the lesson. Like there are, especially I think I've always taken, if you see the same reoccurring things,
there's something that you still haven't learned.
There's still something that God's preparing you for what He has for you, but there's a major lesson you're missing. And I've noticed, for me, I've been doing that. Like, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I see it time and time again, I'm like, all right, what did I do last time?
Yeah.
How can I fix it this time?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm tired of going through this. Yes, I completely agree with you 100%. And I can truly say the same, where I've seen God come through in ways that I'm just like, still to this day, I'm like, okay, so that needed to happen for me to end up here, for me to meet this person, for me to, you know. Like,
when you're looking at it after it happens, you're like, man, if this never happened, then this would have never happened. Then this would have never happened. You know,
if I didn't end up here in this city, in this job, and you know, like, it's just.
Yeah, I mean, we know that. I mean, when me and you got together, right? Like, that's how it kind of was. Like, I was supposed to be gone.
Literally,
I was supposed to be gone.
I remember.
And, you know,
just so happened you randomly text me, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be in such and such, you know, here, and then. By the grace of God, you were, about an hour and some change away, so you wasn't that far.
Yep.
And then helped me, you know, you came, you helped me move in, and then the rest been history, and now we here, married, 2 kids later, you know.
Doing a podcast.
But I truly do believe that if we just trust in God wholeheartedly, even when it's rough, even in the wilderness, even in the waiting season, even in the barren seasons.
Well, that should be when we double down, right?
Yeah.
The devil tried to tempt Jesus when he was fasting.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't try to tempt him when he was strong.
Yeah. He tried to get him in his weakness.
He tried to get him in his weakness. Yeah. And so I think that's when we have those moments. That's when we need to hold tight.
And Jesus, what he did, it was a perfect example of how we handle those situations, because he responded to him with the word of God.
Yep.
And that's why it's just so important. I'm going to always go back to it. It's so important to know the word. And I mean, maybe you don't remember the scriptures, but at least, you know, like, I can look it up real quick, or I can refer to it.
We got no excuse. I mean, we got Google. If you Google like me, I just say scripture for.
Times are different. Yeah. So it's really no excuse, but you can always just look it up and find out the word for yourself.
To see how little God actually, because I think in our mind, when we think of these prophets and stuff, we're thinking like they're talking every day. Well, not that they're talking to God, but God is responding today. God is telling them the things that they're giving them exact instructions. And we read in this and it's like, not really.
No, he's
just kind of giving them a little piece, and he's like, all right, let's see how strong you stand in that faith, or are you gonna get weak and buckle and go sleep with your handmaiden?
Right? You know what? I guess I never really thought about why God speak in parts, and maybe it is just like testing your faith.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that being a thing. I think that's what that's been. But I mean, I'm pretty sure other things had to get in place, right? Definitely, there's things also happening, but there's a test of faith. And it's no coincidence that one of the fruits of the Spirit is patience.
Yes.
So, you got anything left?
No. We can go ahead and close it out.
All right. So, join us next time. We'll be going over chapters 18 and 19. Mm-hmm. And we just thank you guys for being with us. Please don't hesitate. Like, share, subscribe.
Yes.
We love to hear your comments. Don't be afraid to comment. Yes. We respond to them. We respond to them.
I mean, sometimes you respond. Sometimes.
Here and there. But we do respond to them because we like to engage. We like to engage. We love to hear your ideas. We love to hear your thoughts. Mm-hmm. If you have something that differs from what we thought, then please point it out. Yeah. And even if it's the same, don't hesitate.
Because again, we're all learning. We're all on this faith journey to get to know God's word more, to understand his nature, to just grow closer to him. Mm-hmm. And we can all help each other in this process. So we appreciate you guys for being on this journey with us. We love you guys. And until next time, have a good one.
Until next time, God bless.
God bless.